Welcome to the Feehery podcast, brought to you by EFB Advocacy. EFB means excellent for business. Joined by my colleagues John Easton, the E, Adam Belmar, the B, and I'm John Feehery, your host. We have a special guest today on the podcast. Nathan Gonzales is a world-famous political prognosticator. He is a native of Oregon.
That's right.
He is a hill dweller.
Well, I claim H Street.
H Street.
H Street.
It's not the hill.
Further northeast. No, not the hill. We're our own.
It's just H Street.
It's just H Street.
We're hip.
He is the founder of a political tip sheet that everyone needs to have inside elections.
That's right.
He's also widely seen on CNN, CBS, and everywhere in the world that cares about politics. And most importantly, he's on the Feehery podcast. And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having. I'm privileged because my name's not John. I remember the one with John Ward. I was feeling like I'd never get on. So
Wow,
thank you for having me.
that's loyalty.
Good point.
That is well. Thank you. We also have a live studio audience. We might get heckled. There's a chance, but we're not certain. Last week we had a really great show. We had Clark Kent, the dog.
The rescue dog.
The rescue dog. It was a huge moment for us because it's our first live animal on the show. But we also had a discussion for some reason about wine.
We did. Well, it was something that our viewers responded to. It was brought forward by John Easton that at the very first White House state dinner, which happened last week in honor of the President of France, that a very special Oregon vintage was served. And we got a lot of response from all of you about that. So we asked John...
But by a lot of response, what do we mean by a lot of response? Like hundreds, thousands?
There was more than 4,000 people who responded seeking information about the Domaine Drouin. And so talk to us a little bit about what we're drinking today, John.
So the Domaine Drouin is what was served at the state dinner, 2014, from the Lorraine Vineyard. And while I didn't, because it's sold out in D.C., as you can imagine, because so many people were inspired by it, but what I did bring along is a 2014 Willamette Valley de Lancelotti, which is actually quite close to it's in the same area as the Domaine Drouin. And what I'd like to do is just, if I might, just for a second.
Right, go please.
Why does Pinot Noir, Oregon Pinot Noir, why is it the best in the world? Why does it produce the best Pinot in the world? And so to take you back about 12 million years, Oregon used to be at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, on the Pacific Ocean seafloor.
Is this going to take a while?
This might take a while.
Did they call it the Pacific?
I'm going to go year by year.
And then what happened was we had massive volcanic activity. That was probably between 5 and 16 million years ago. And then 15 to 18,000 years ago was at the end of the Ice Age, the big glacier around Missoula, Montana, melted and sent massive floods down our way in Oregon. And so sent with it this incredible sediment that settled in this whole area. And so that is the Willamette Valley. And so what really for millions of years, what the Willamette Valley was an ocean floor trapped between two emerging mountain ranges. And guess who was born in that Willamette Valley? Nathan Gonzales was born in a small town.
Not far.
So we would like to honor those who responded positively to our discussion of Pinot Noir and the state dinner. So cheers to everyone.
Cheers.
All right, cheers. Fair enough. All right, that's great.
I highly recommend you.
What I love is when you go to these restaurants, I'm amazed that there's Willamette Valley wine at these, at nicer restaurants, but when they're so poised and refined and they say this Wilmette or Wilmette Valley, I'm like,
No, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
You got the right wine, you just don't know how to pronounce it.
So talking about not knowing what the hell they're talking about, let's start with the theories. Theory one, what a fool believes. I like the Doobie Brothers, and that's one of my favorite songs, What a Fool Believes, and it kind of applies to me. I'm a fool, and I believe, Nathan Gonzales, that the Republicans are going to keep the House of Representatives. Why am I wrong?
Go big or go home, I guess.
That's right. Okay.
So, I've learned after 2016 that I have personally ruling things out. So I will rule out Republicans winning the House. I just think it's incredibly unlikely. I think when we look at what the possibilities are on election night in the House, or whether Democrats have a good night, a great night, or a historic night, and it's not really, or Republicans can have a good night. I think where everyone's a little bit skittish on making projections because most people didn't predict that Donald Trump was going to be president of the United States, but I still don't I don't think that means that we throw out decades of historical results on what midterms are. Midterms are tough for the president's party. President's party's lost House seats in 18 of the last 20 midterm elections. Average seat loss is 33 seats in those 18. Democrats need 23 right now. And if you look at the specials, I mean, the special elections, I know every election is special and unique, but when you look at the trend, Democrats are overperforming across the board. And I just think there are enough vulnerable Republican seats that Democrats are going to end up getting there.
So Doug Schwartz is in the audience today, and he's been telling me precisely that. I am of the opinion that there's the three M's: the map, the message, and money. And my view on the money is it's largely tied. There's a lot of outside Republican money. Democrats have so many primary opponents that have raised a lot of money through their Unite Blue or whatever it's called.
Act Blue.
Act Blue. Mm-hmm. But they have big primary problems. I think the map still is good for Republicans in the House and the Senate. And I think the message is the thing that I can't quite figure out what the Democratic message is. I remember in 1998 when the Republican message was, we're going to impeach Bill Clinton. That seems to be what the Democratic message is. So I'm still bullish on the Republicans keeping the House. I think they might lose 10 seats, but I think they're going to keep the House. John Easton, what do you think?
Well, I think you're smoking something out from the West Coast.
Hey, John Boehner is in favor of smoking pot. So.
I heard that.
Yeah, okay.
So is Dianne Feinstein, apparently. But one of the cool things about your job is you get to interface with all these campaigns across the country. And one of the things I've noticed with wave elections in the past, not totally, but a lot of waves also crash over bad incumbents. Mm-hmm. Who maybe shouldn't have been there in the first place. What are you seeing out there in terms of quality of incumbents, particularly Republican incumbents, and is there a bit of a wall of quality that can withstand some of this wave that could be coming?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for Republicans is some of the incumbents, the strongest incumbents that are running the best campaigns and raising the best money are also in the most difficult districts. Like a Barbara Comstock in Northern Virginia is probably going to run one of the best financed, best campaigns, but this might be an electoral condition or a wave that even she can't overcome that. Or Carlos Curbelo in Florida, Katko in New York probably could survive. It's smaller media market, easier to carve out your own brand, but I think that in terms of incumbent preparation, it's across the board. You have Republicans who are prepared and others that think that this is no big deal. We won those special elections, Pennsylvania 18, who cares about Alabama? We're going to be fine, and those are the ones that are at considerable risk. And John, to your point about Democrats and primaries and ideologies, I think that I don't think that those primaries and maybe more liberal or progressive candidates mean Democrats can't win in a general election because over 8 years we saw Republicans fighting. The Tea Party was attacking the establishment, and Mitch McConnell wasn't conservative. And where did that get Republicans? It got them the House, the Senate, and the White House because they had a common enemy, and that was President Obama. Democrats now are fighting. There's no leader, all of this, but they have a common enemy, and that's President Trump. And he's the energy behind the Democratic Party right now.
So, Adam, I know you want to come in on this, but I would say my point on the money side was that there's a lot of Democratic money, but it's split up with these primary guys. And I do think that the more liberal primary elections that do win, that really does put the Republicans in halfway decent shape. But I get your point, and we don't know what's going to happen. The other thing that I was thinking about is what voters most care about. And there's a poll that came out today that what they care about the most is not what's going on with Russia, even all the Trump stuff. What they care most about is the economy. When you think about when you talk to voters, what are you thinking about what they care most about?
Well, I think when it comes to the economy, I think voters we're selfish. Americans are selfish first. Am I doing okay at home? I think that's a preeminence. But specifically, when you look at the dynamic between Democrats and the president, Democrats aren't going to give the president credit for anything. The economy could be booming. They'll say it's in spite of the president, not because of it. So Democrats are kind of off the table. The question is, can Republicans and the president convince those voters in the middle that the country's heading in the right direction, stay the course, or can they make sure to use the tax bill to get Republicans to turn out? Because to me, Democratic turnout's going to be high. We know that. Republican turnout is the question mark, and if Republicans are depressed, then that's when those historic numbers start to take shape.
But do you think that the Trump voters are depressed, or do you think they're excited?
Well, I think those Trump voters are first, we're talking about a segment of Republicans that are first loyal to the president. And if they think that the Republicans on the Hill are part of the problem and they're stopping the president's agenda or not going far enough to support the president, then why do they vote in the fall? Because they view him as part of the problem. Now that's going to be, well, don't make Pelosi the speaker, and they'll come out with these excuses, but the Republican grassroots is with the president. He's the most popular person in the Republican Party right now among Republicans. And if Republicans on the Hill aren't on board, then why would they vote?
Speaking to one of the Republican Party committees, the congressional committees, they were saying that in their battleground states that they were looking at, this is actually the Senate, that the energy that they were seeing among their voters, among the Republican voters, hadn't been depressed. It hadn't been down. It actually was quite high. Have you been hearing the same thing?
Well, I think that I've been talking about the two Americas with John, going back to John Edwards' speech, that the fight for the House and the fight for the Senate, I think, are two completely different things. I think Republicans have a real chance at holding the Senate majority, maybe even adding to the Senate majority, because the map in those Republican states, I'm not convinced that all the Trump state Democratic senators are vulnerable. I'm not sure Debbie Stabenow is that vulnerable, for example, but those Manchin, Donnelly, McCaskill, Heitkamp, Bill Nelson with Rick Scott, those are serious opportunities where if you can just generate Republican enthusiasm, then that can get Republicans a long way.
Let me jump in and ask a quick question here. I saw in the Wall Street Journal this morning op-ed by one Karl Rove. And
I've heard of him.
Yeah, you've heard of him before. So one of the things that Karl Rove is talking about, I think, surrounds the optics of the blue wave. You sort of sounded the political tsunami warning. You say it's coming, it's just a matter of how high. One of the things that people are reporting about is the disparity in money raised. And Rove has shed a light on the fact that when you look at individual races and don't aggregate money within the primary field, incumbent Republicans are actually doing quite well. Is there truth to that, and what impact might that have if you take that sort of take on how people are set against their challengers?
I think it varies. Again, some incumbents are the fundraising is better than others, but the Democratic fundraising has just been through the roof. For example, in Missouri, State Attorney General Josh Hawley, who's kind of the anointed Republican nominee, raised $1.5 million in the first 3 months of the year. Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey, first-time Democratic candidate running in New Jersey's 11th district, raised $1.1 million.
That's a haul.
A House candidate. This is not even, it's just something we haven't seen. It's because President Trump is encouraging, inciting the Democratic base. But the candidate fundraising is important, and I think we saw this in a lot of these special elections, where particularly Pennsylvania 18, when you looked at the total R&D spending, it was about even, but because Connor Lamb, now Congressman Connor Lamb, had so much more money than the Republican candidate Rick Saccone, he had more ads on television because he was paying a lower rate. And so when the Republican outside groups came in with big money, they weren't getting as many ads for that same dollar.
Talking about Rick Saccone and Connor Lamb, Lamb was most interesting because he was pro-gun and anti-Nancy Pelosi. Looking at how toxic is Pelosi going to be in these elections? She's been the gift that keeps on giving for Republicans for quite a while.
I think it might be another cycle where Republicans can milk, get incite the base and get that going. I'm not sure how much further, unless she's speaker again. I guess we'll go around with another circle. But the Pelosi hit was damaging enough that Connor Lamb had to answer it on television. He went up with an ad, but it wasn't enough to win the race. And I think that should be concerning in a Trump plus 21 district. I think that should be concerning for Republicans.
So looking, you go all around the country. Give us any good stories you have about what you've seen out there. And what are your kind of picks to click for races that is on no one's radar screen, which you think will surprise people?
Well, it's my job to avoid surprises. I think one of the next places, we have a whole set of primaries coming up on May 8th, on Tuesday. Indiana, West Virginia, big Senate primaries, Ohio governor, Ohio Senate as well. And so that'll kind of clear the field, start to winnow the fields a little bit, give us a better idea. I think June 5th in California, I'm fascinated with the Orange County races, four races, whether Democrats can make sure they get one of the top two. There's been breaking news about a candidate in the Ed Royce open seat. But
what's the breaking news?
there was one of the Democratic candidate who was favored by the DCCC. There was a state assembly candidate, a Democrat, who made some allegations of inappropriate misconduct at a recent Democratic,
More of that.
the local convention.
Right.
So it's a kind of a swirling process. But there are so many, I think a challenge is there are so many potentially hot races. I won't say they're fully developed, but all over the country that's trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And we're at this place in the cycle where you're not sure what's a contender and a pretender.
So we do have a studio audience here. I would recommend if you do have a question, you can either shout it out or give me a note. We have a really great studio audience. State Farm is here, which is Tim Lacasse. And Caldwell Baker is here.
You don't get a question.
You can any of you guys could have questions, and we'd be glad to have it. My wife Carrie is here, which is fantastic. She's got the rosé going, which is great.
I suddenly need a reverse camera angle for this podcast.
And there are about 50 others, but we can't go through
We can't
all
go
the
through
names.
everybody.
Not as many as the thousands of people who asked for more information on the wine, but large numbers.
Large numbers.
Incredibly large numbers. John, do you have any other thoughts that you want to add on this topic?
Not on this topic. No.
So, Nathan, third topic I want to ask, and that is the state of polling. Do you think the polls are accurate? I think about kind of Rasmussen that says that President Trump's approval was like 49 to 40.
Can I jump in there? Because I have this debate with other people, and I know I'm prone to jumping in on you. But people sometimes call it Rasmussen or Rasmussen. I think that's the way they say it. Can you be an arbiter on that? No, we'll go with my take, Rasmussen.
I'd say Rasmussen.
Rasmussen,
I'd
right?
say Rasmussen.
What did I say, Rasmussen?
Rasmussen. I've never heard it.
Rasmussen?
Rasmussen.
All right, well,
And he's not even involved in the polling. Scott, he's not even in that part of that company anymore. It just makes it even more confusing.
well,
But he
So-
just got a lot of airtime right there.
There we go.
Rasmussen. All right, so Rasmussen has Trump up at 49%. Other polls have him like 32%. What is the state of polling today?
Well, I'm glad this is a 6-hour podcast so we can cover this topic. I think the important things are to not make any single judgment on any one poll, not to overanalyze any one poll. Continue to look at the aggregate. Averaging, I think, helps. It's not necessarily the cure-all for everything. I think the polling industry is in a state of crisis, still trying to figure out how to not only are you asking the right questions and are what answers are people giving, but are you getting the right electorate? I think that's one of the reasons why 2016 was a miss, is that there were assumptions made about what the electorate would look like, and it didn't look quite like that. I mean, Republicans, I would argue, made the mistake in 2012, those that thought Mitt Romney was going to do better, because they thought 2012 would look nothing like 2008. That was a historic election, and actually the 2012 electorate looked remarkably like 2008. So I think you have polling. I think you have pollsters, looking at doing multi-mode, not just doing things with phones, but also online. But that's you're asking a panel, and that's not a random sample. And are you getting? I mean, there's a lot of. So to me, I try to do. We're not pollsters ourselves, but I try to look at public and private polling, partisan and nonpartisan polling, put it all together and look for a trend.
That's why publications like yours are so important to this process, because I was just today, I was CNN ran, I don't know who did the poll. Usually they do it, they team up with.
They used to be with
BBC,
Gallup. I don't know where they
Gallup,
are
yeah.
today.
But anyway, they showed a congressional approval of 17 approve and 71% disapprove. What does that give you exactly? I mean, that gives you nothing. It doesn't say anything about an individual member of Congress to his or her constituents. And then you had, and then they have an 8%, Democrats have an 8% margin advantage on the generic ballot,
yeah.
right? And that's even now getting to be a kind of a ridiculous number now, because it doesn't give you enough flavor for the individual district or state and what the issues are and the intensity behind those issues. So I think you're right. The state of play of polling from just an observer of national news, I think, has gotten really bad and really lazy. They need to pick up more of what you're doing, because you guys can sift through what's really trash and what's actually really valuable.
I mean, the temptation on the national numbers is really problematic, and that's where because we should have learned we don't elect a president nationally,
Right.
because
Right.
if we did, the outcome would be different. And we certainly don't elect a Congress nationally. So show me what the generic is of the president's job approval is in a district or a specific state with a Senate race. That's what I care
Because
most
like in
about.
North Dakota, the president's approval rating is
At least over 50. I mean, well
60,
over 50.
60
I
something.
think it's 60 something, right?
60 something. You got in Montana, where his approval rating is around 62, 63, and then you see what he's doing with John Tester, who
Right.
kind of screwed his doctor.
And the question is then, but how transferable is the president's popularity to other candidates? I mean, Republicans could have a President Obama problem, and that President Obama was great at getting himself elected and reelected, but his popularity, no one else in the Democratic Party is a Barack Obama, and I would argue no one else in the Republican Party is Donald Trump, even though they're running around trying to be.
You see, I think the problem with the Republican Party is not necessarily the Trump problem; it's their own production problem. I mean, what they're trying to do is they're trying to sell a tax cut, which, when it first passed, it wasn't that popular. It became more popular when they were talking about it, when all these corporations were actually giving bonuses and, saying they were going to relocate plants and raising wages, which they promised. And then they stopped talking about it, and Trump got off on other stuff. And now their singular achievement is back down to being fairly unpopular. I mean, my view is that the Republicans don't get that thing sold better, or talk about something else. And I think if you think about even President Trump, he's like, I don't want to talk about this tax cuts. I want to talk
He
about.
never really has.
I know. You want to talk about immigration or anything else.
Right, and Democrats are I think what the plan is on the Democratic side is to talk about health care. They say, well, you might see more money in your paycheck because of that tax bill, but let's talk about what you're paying in health care because of what Republicans did in Congress, and you're not coming out ahead when you put those two things together. That's going to be one of the primary message fights going all the way to November.
So in your magazine, is it a magazine? What do you call it?
Newsletter, but that
Newsletter?
sounds like it's 1,000 years old. So
Is it
I'm
a
not
newsletter?
sure.
What do you call it? Is it
We'll call
is
it the truth.
the truth. So
That's good.
when you're doing your truthful analysis, now who buys your product?
Everyone. No, not my wife would
It's
say
a
not enough people.
subscription-based digital product.
Yeah,
that is,
I would say
widely
for
used.
PACs and associations or people that care about stuff you're not going to see on cable news, give us a look.
And so tell us more about the history of it. How did it get started?
So it started with Stu Rothenberg. It was called the Rothenberg Political Report for at least 25 years, and a couple years ago I took it over from Stu, and we continue on just under a different name.
So if you want the truth on politics, and how do we get your product?
We're at InsideElections.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Nathan L. Gonzales.
And what's the subscription? What was it?
So we have an
Negotiate prices?
individual subscription. Well, it depends
Individual
on how
rate?
the cycle goes. Individual subscription is $249 a year, but we also have licensed subscriptions for group rates. I think that are specifically tailored for PACs. If you want to help expand your donor base for your PAC and the branding within your own company, then we have a slightly higher dollar amount with more perks.
And when you're going through this and writing your reports, how do you do it? Are you going to these different districts, or?
I have 4 kids, John. I'm going to give away everything. I'm trying to make money here.
I can tell you when I manage campaigns,
Just got
I
caught
would,
pouring
I
more
would,
wine
I would go
in
to
the
see
wine shot.
guys like you and Stu and Charlie Cook, and you sell them on your campaign, especially if you're a challenger or if it's an open seat, you're one of the nominee. You've got to see these guys because you got to get not their endorsed because they don't endorse, but you got to try to get a favorable write-up. I have raised this much money last quarter. My polling says this. My pollster, you give them the polling, right? And talk about all your steering committee and all this. You provide legitimacy to you guys, and you guys kind of take that into account as you're evaluating races.
And what we do, I mean, we take the numbers side, both the historical results, and we take the current polling. That's the quantitative side, and the qualitative side, just doing reporting, meeting with candidates, meeting with sources that are here that have been watching races or out in the district and out in the state, and try to put it all together, sort through, and so our readers don't have to sort through everything.
And you
try
also
to
look
figure
at
out
the
what
local
matters.
news, what's going on in their districts, in their states, because that's really what matters in those races.
I've been doing this long enough. We used to get campaign ads on VHS tape after the election was over. I'm like, well, this would have been nice to know when the campaign was going. Now with YouTube, I mean, it's a whole new world. So it's in that way, it's a little bit easier.
All right, so we have a segment here on the Feehery podcast where we talk about what we're buying or selling today. And I'd be quite candid with you. I haven't even thought about it. So I want John Easton to go first. And by the time...
All right. Pressure's on.
Pressure's on, John.
The pressure is on. I thought about it for about 10 seconds earlier.
Did you consult with Clark Kent, the rescue dog?
Where is he? Carrie, where's the dog? I do want to buy Clark Kent. He's welcome here at any time. He's a nice mascot for us. But I'm just gonna flat out. This is. I'm not cozying up to you, but I would buy inside elections. And I'm serious because I've been doing, been in the campaign world a long time, and these are just invaluable.
You would buy, or you're going to buy?
I'm going to buy.
That's what I thought I heard you say.
This is on tape, right? This is on the record.
$249 individual subscriptions.
$249. Cut me deal. But anyway, we've talked a lot about a lot of the reasons why to get this kind of information. But I just will reiterate that what we're getting out there. Basically, from whether it's Washington Post or CNN or MSNBC, a lot of these outlets, they're just not doing our process, our race's justice. And I think that these guys do all the necessary homework to break it down and actually give you some solid, really valuable information so you're more well informed. I mean, obviously, we're in this world where we do this on a daily basis, so it really helps people like the three of us and those in our audience. But I just am really impressed with the work you do, and I would buy.
Okay, there we go. That's a good one. I liked it. Nathan, you're next because you got that great.
I'm going to go in a completely different direction. I'm going to buy Bryce Harper. I'm tired of Nats.
I've never heard that before on this podcast.
Me and being on the fence. Just pay the man. I mean, he's going to be the best baseball player, that Major League Baseball has to offer for the next 10 years. Whatever he wants, just pay him.
So let me ask you this.
I'll throw in a couple bucks.
Do you think, by when you go to the game, do you think that he should continue to lead off?
To be determined. But what I don't like is when now, after 2 games, they say he's the best leadoff hitter in baseball history when Ricky Henderson is the best
Obviously.
leadoff hitter in baseball history. Let's give Bryce some time on that.
Obviously.
As the greatest base stealer of all time. That helps.
Leading in number of leadoff home runs, I mean, he's got a little bit of a lead.
Adam Belmar, what are you buying or selling today?
I am buying Gina Haspel. If you don't know who she is, she's the acting director of Central Intelligence. She was the deputy director of the CIA underneath now Secretary of State Pompeo. The beginning of her confirmation hearing is next week in the Senate, and she is a fantastic American, would make the most well-qualified Director of Central Intelligence perhaps we have ever had. She hails from the clandestine ranks and operations. She gave her life over and redoubled her commitment to our country after 9/11. There's a lot of politics that's going on, a lot of evil things that have been said about her. I subscribe to none of them. I suggest you do your reading, you get the truth on that, and you will see that she will be confirmed by the United States Senate, and we will all be better off for it.
That was a strong buy.
Wow. Well said. I'm not sure if I agree with it, but I think she's going to get confirmed. And I think it's great. I'll at least
I wasn't quite as firm before I had the first glass of Oregon Pinot, but it just came. I don't know.
I think Adam's buying some Oregon Pinot. I'm going to buy 2 things. I'm going to first buy our studio audience, and I really appreciate you all coming today because it's always great to have a live audience. I'm also going to buy the Feehery Happy Hour editions because you know what? Nothing makes things better than a happy hour. It makes everyone happy, and there should be more of it. And if you can combine our podcast with a happy hour, I think everyone is happy. So cheers to everybody in the studio audience.
Cheers.
And thanks for joining the Feehery podcast, brought to you by EFB Advocacy. EFB means
excellent for business.
Yeah, baby.